All right, ready? Okay, and then, you ready? Okay, I now call the meeting reconvened at 6:30 p.m. Before we begin, does any committee member wish to declare any actual or potential conflicts of interest?
Here.
Yep.
I'd like to declare potential conflict of interest because my wife works at the city employee.
Okay, thank you. Roll call.
Committee member Schwartzler. Here. Committee member Source.
Here.
Committee member Roden. Committee member Waber.
Here.
Committee member Martin Willis. She is here.
You.
Committee member Morton.
Here.
Committee member Core.
Here.
Chair Garrison.
Here.
Committee member Porter. Here. Committee member Sherman.
Here.
Committee member Seiler. Here. Committee member Praskoff.
Here.
Committee member Christensen.
Here.
And committee member Carson is attending via Zoom and he is online right now.
All right, wonderful. All right, thank you for all being here. You've done a lot of really great work so far. I think we have some to be able to get through most of the stuff today, maybe improve it. We do want to remind that we're working on numbers and not on policies for departments. So keep that in mind that our job is to look at the numbers. And then I'd also like to point out that this balance is budget. This budget is balanced and is, unless we have other changes that we want to make. Okay, so we did get some questions, but we will first do public comment. And I have Gabby. Will you please make sure you state your name and your address for the public record?
And not solve it and do all of you.
Yes.
Okay,
State your name, please.
Gabby Walton. Good evening, my name is Gabby Walton and I come to you today as a parent of 5, a city volunteer, a nonprofit and small business owner, and a proud resident of Independence. I also serve on the Independence State Commissioner Board, so I just want to make that known. And I've been in many meetings over the last year, public and private, about the direction of our city, especially as it relates to the budget and community programming with outside organizations. I want to start by recognizing that I understand the city council and this committee must make hard decisions in what they believe is best for our community, but I also believe it is important to bring forward the voices of those who may feel unheard or confused by all of the changes and processes. I am not here to criticize anyone's intentions or service, and I do value and respect the work that you do. You're incredible for serving your time. I'm here to advocate for clear communication, more public transparency, and deeper inclusion for families and community stakeholders. Lately, I've noticed growing confusion, even among those who are actively involved. I sat in meetings where data and language shared publicly doesn't always match the next meeting or difference between city representatives. That disconnect hurts the trust and makes it harder for us to feel understood for explain decisions to neighbors. Just yesterday, a local business owner approached me asking if her and a group of businesses were interested in supporting Independence Day, how they would do that and how they could get a leader. Though that's not the point itself, the point is that these are prominent businesses that want to help, but don't know how or feel left out of their conversation. That's a loss for all of us. Our community is filled with families, small business owners, volunteers, and individuals from all walks of life who care deeply about the city. Too many of them feel disconnected from the process, especially when meetings are happening during work hours, dinner hours, sporting events, lack of childcare, and the communication lacks consistency. I hear concerns about our library, our parks, and our downtown as the manager position is not being filled, and I'm asking when and how are we including the voices that people are being impacted by these changes? Are we actively going to these families and community members and not just inviting them to a meeting? We need communication as a city that is consistent from meeting to meeting and department to department. We need clarity and not just committees. We need accessible spaces where our residents, and especially our young families, minorities, and newcomers feel safe to ask questions and share concerns. Because of us, those of us who are already involved are confused, I imagine how they feel. Thank you for your service and hearing me out tonight, and I hope that this will spark deeper reflection as we build the community on how we all work toward being more transparent, inclusive, and connected as an independence.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good. All right, any other, just the one? Thank you. So now on my thing, it just says budget committee discussion. We did get a list of questions that were emailed. Thank you for sending them to us. Does the staff want to discuss any of them in particular, or do you want me to handle them?
You guys just go through them and discuss them, and then if there are questions, be happy to provide input if
Different.
asked for or desired.
Okay.
Okay.
Everyone got questions, they'll go to them. The email,
What question?
one email they sent out today,
One last from all of us that we
Mhm.
submitted.
I don't have.
I can give you a compass. I got an extras. I'll send you a bill. It's part of my general fund initiative.
Could we review these
Yeah.
one by one?
One by one? Okay. So the first one, is talking about, funding for the, levy or a monthly fee to keep the museum and the library hours as they currently are.
I think we've left the door open for a levy in sometime in the future, whether it's exactly the numbers here, I don't know. It'll probably be something we have to decide at that time. Costs are always going up, so we have to make some adjustments.
Well, it did say a monthly fee, so we could adjust the public safety fee, is that
I don't know
what
that-
they would mean, or?
It would be similar to the public safety fee, except it would be a culture fee or community
It would
service.
be in the water bill that are added to the water bill, correct? Yeah.
That's cool.
Okay. Now,
I'm sorry if this is already said, I'm not hearing all the voices over here.
uh-huh.
We can't do a levy that originates out of this committee. It would have to be on the November ballot, and that would be the first opportunity.
If I may, Chair,
Yes,
probably the May ballot,
Say again?
probably the May ballot,
Okay, May of next year.
yeah.
I'm just thinking of the next one coming up.
Hitting November would be incredibly difficult.
Yes, it would.
And you are
Which
correct.
means
it
that we
becomes-
still have to solve the shortfall issue for this year.
yes. Jamie.
I wasn't first, I believe. Jeff
Oh,
was,
sorry,
but-
Jessica.
Definitely, if we are gonna put it back on the ballot, I definitely would like to see a little more prep and maybe bigger, I mean, I would like to be involved in it too. I felt like how quickly it went on the ballot last time was maybe a little hasty. I don't know. I think that, even after the vote, people in the community still had a lot of questions and didn't really fully understand how that vote was going to affect things, and also being on the ballot at the same time as the school district bond, when everybody's already praying for money. So I think that, you know, at no fault of any one person, but I think that the timing could be better for the levy, and we maybe would have had a different outcome. I'm curious though about the, so if we were to add a fee to the water bill, do other cities do that? Is, because I know we have the safety fee on there, and I think that makes a lot of sense to me to have a fee on there that is going towards the essential services. But since the museum and the library and the parks, while essential to the community, is not officially deemed as an essential service, that I don't know how we would feel about having that as a fee on the water bill. So can you tell us how other cities do that?
There are a number of other cities that have fees on their water bills. The one that comes to mind is Corvallis. They have a lot of them. But there are a number of other, I don't remember the list. but
There are a significant number that do, throughout. That's one of the tools, one of the only tools that we have. As far as our community, just for clarity and informative purposes, we did do a lot of outreach on fees, and they were universally hated. I just don't have a better word. They were hated. We received feedback in our surveys, which we received quite a few. And the bulk of them were no more fees. We don't want to pay any more for anything. They were loud and clear. So but for our community, that's what they.
Yeah, well, I'm glad, save me the trouble of having to get a second on this before we discuss it. I did have some notes regarding this that I'll go over briefly.
Okay.
I just want to point out that Independence Vision 2040 plan, you know, people overwhelmingly value supporting private schools, youth, inclusive and involved community, our small town feel, and our local history. So this is an important asset to a lot of people in our city. I also agree that last year there were a lot of fees and levies on the ballot. People were facing a lot more hardship last year, and granted, things haven't gotten much better. But as we've said repeatedly, we're continuously doing stopgaps here to try to keep ourselves afloat for the real problem, which is lack of revenue. A $5 fee, which it would be at most, assuming council did that, of course, this is also something council would have to sort out. Would only be an increase of at most $2, considering the public safety fee will be coming down by $3. So at most, people would be looking at a $2 monthly increase to save the library, or in the museum, excuse me, save the day at the library and preserve the museum. And one of the reasons I think this is really important too, is when those items go into storage, there's always the possibility for degradation, rats, things like that, humidity damage, you know, there's issues that can arise. There's also an issue with other cities where they have done this before. They put these items in storage and, you know, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, the city's like, we're hanging on to this storage full of stuff we don't want. We need to cut costs, we cut it out and we lose access. There's also the issue of people withdrawing their donations because they're no longer publicly displayed. So there are a lot of issues that can arise by doing this, not to mention the loss of the asset. If we lose the museum building, we don't have a building anymore. We have to buy a new building. And that's a lot harder to come back from than right now, at least allowing council the opportunity. So that was the gist of what I want to say. Yes.
Shannon?
I don't mean to put you on the spot, Dana, but a couple of weeks ago, you said you campaigned against the levy. What changed your mind?
Looking at the budget, I mean, realistically, there's just not money. There's not enough to fund the services that our community values. And, you know, it sucks to have to change my mind about that, but the facts are the facts. And I am much more in favor of a 40-cent proposed levy than $1.82. And this is a different year, fewer things on the ballot. It would at least allow me a more reasonable consideration of it as a community member. And I think that a lot of other people might be able to say it too.
I think maybe the numbers need to be adjusted if we go for the May ballot.
Nathan?
Yeah, I just wanted to step in real quick and make an observation that I want to start here a little bit. If we do talk about fees or levies, I would really like to put that in the context of a general fund fee or levy, rather than trying to target specifically the library or specifically the museum. Because the reality is, like, if we don't get more revenue, and we can't cut our way out of the revenue problem, we don't. Well, and if we did try to cut ourselves out of the revenue problem, and we only left the police, 3 or 4 years from now, we'll be cutting them too. Because the revenue is going down overall. It's not because we're just not, you know, living within our means. That's not the case, you know. So if we do a fee or levy discussion, which I'd be really happy to discuss in this setting, I'd really like to personally keep the scope at general fund level. Because it's everybody's, city staff, library, museum, and the police. You cut everything else, 5 years from now, we'll be sitting here doing the same thing, cutting the costs. Guaranteed. Expenses are going up, revenue's going down. So just keep that in mind as we're discussing this, that this is a general fund, full court press, you know, effort. That's what I'm saying.
Dawn?
I think people are hesitant on paying fees because we lack transparency in some issues, just like what was said by a city member. I know you guys don't like it when I say this, but people are not happy about the park that was built, the amount of money that was spent on a park, the flat slide that was put in the park. It's terrible. So like I've asked for transparency on how much money we spent on fixtures because I'm being told we spent $60,000 to $75,000 on a wood structure that only toddlers can play on. And so people are just concerned about misspending in our community. And I've said this when I first started city council. The reason why I started is because my family couldn't afford to pay the water bill. My family couldn't afford, they stopped taking long showers because they couldn't afford the water bill, and didn't matter how quick their showers were, the water bill was still the same. And people just can't afford it. They just can't afford it. And I know, I wish we still had the old museum, and I think we could have fixed it. And I want the library saved. I want that saved. So, but we're going to have to do what Nathan said. We're gonna have to make some long-term adjustments to our general fund. We have to fund our police. We have to fund the main things. And I know it's gonna be hard for us to do.
Sure, if I may.
Yeah.
For clarity, Sunset Park, as we've talked about before many times, was paid for by grants and SDCs. It has no effect on the general fund. So it's not a part of the discussion that we're having on the
It
general fund.
shows our misspending.
Just for clarity.
It shows our misspending. That's why I brought it up.
All right, Shannon, you were next, and Aaron, do you have a question after that? I think Shannon's next.
To follow up with what City Manager West said, you were not on council when Sunset Meadows residents came and talked to us. They came several times demanding their park. They paid for it, they wanted their park. Regardless of what it cost, it is not the residents' money that went into their park. I think if you went and spoke to every person in Sunset Meadows, Councilor Source is one of them, they love that park. I think it's a falsity to put out that we overspent or we mismanaged money in that effort. We did not. We were very lucky to get grants, very lucky to have partners to help support that park. Go talk to Sunset Meadows.
Since she's directed that towards me, I got Pioneer Park built for less money because I brought people in for the community to get it done. I know it was 10 years ago,
You
it
can't
was
compare the two.
$40,000. It could have been done cheaper.
Times have changed, things have changed, regulations have changed.
We're gonna
They're
get
not
this-
accurate. And we're not gonna do this, we're not discussing parks right now. We're not discussing what parks were built or what was not built. We're discussing the budget and the numbers. I understand there's a lot of discussion about it. That's not what we're doing today. We're just trying to figure out the solution for these number problems that are right here in front of us. That's what we're working. So if you guys can please stay civil and bring up accurate, current information, that'd be great. Okay. This proposed question that we have, do we have any more questions on this specific item? Kevin?
Thank you, Chair. I knocked on a lot of doors last November, and I actually feel like people knew what they were voting for. So I have a lot of concerns about having a conversation so quickly without a levy. Because people have come into council, people have come into budget hearings and say, we don't want any backdoor tax increase fees. We knew what we were voting for. And I believe them. So I guess my question is, what for city staff, based on your experience and based on community you've just dealt with this, what needs to change when a community votes clearly as they did, whether we like it or not, they voted clearly? What can we do and what needs to change in order to create the environment to have a real conversation? And maybe you don't have an answer, and that's okay, that's fair.
General answer, I'll try to be quick, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
We usually like to have 2 years in order to educate and let everybody know where we are, why we're there, and what we're looking for. Unfortunately, we didn't have 2 years when we came in, when my team came in. We had less than a year to try and fix the problem. We started that 2-year process last year with additional time and education. And, you know, employees can't do anything after that goes out. So then it is up to the Friends of the Library, the Friends of the Museum, if we get Friends of the Parks, whatever, it's up to a community member to do that. And it's all about going to the Rotary and the Chamber and having those discussions. My team put out a lot of information, put that information out. So it's time and education, Counselor. We just had an entire session on this at the League of Oregon Cities Conference because every city is struggling and trying to figure out how to overcome the gap.
I am next after this. I waited in my.
Sure you are.
I did. Going off Evan's thing. This amount of money for specifically for the library and the museum and the parks were on the ballot. And the city voted on it. The citizens of this town voted on it. And they overwhelmingly said no. So I feel, in my opinion, that this would be like, we basically saying the city didn't listen to you. Oh, you voted, no, you didn't vote right. And we're just gonna do this anyway. And I think it would look really, really bad. All right, Kate, you were next.
Thank you. So I just want to say that, kind of to Nathan's point, this isn't a 1-year problem. This is a multiple year problem. We're going to be having the same conversation next year, possibly the next year after that. So we can't cut our way out of this. We can temporarily. And so the flip side of this is looking at how do we bring more revenue into the city, which is a whole separate discussion outside of the scope of what's tonight. I do think the levy is an option that we may need to rely on in the future. We may need that in our back pocket, but before that's successful, I do think unfortunately the community, not just our community, but communities around us are going to need to see and feel those cuts. Salem is closing their libraries, other communities are making cuts. Nobody's a fan of that. I don't, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to do that. But I think unfortunately that's where we're at. And then at that point, we might be able to go back out with the levy and it might change people's perspectives to see some of those changes actually happen. And then I also, in terms of the fees, we had a lot of feedback from the community that felt like we were circumnavigating the voting process. And so I just want to be very careful and cognizant of that as we move forward. And for those reasons, I just don't think fees are viable at this moment. And again, I think with the fees, it could be a stopgap measure that we may have to rely on in a year or two because we're simply out of other options.
All right, so to try to work backwards through all of that. First to address member Schwartzler's point there. I understand the value of leaving the option of a levy open in the future. That what we're essentially saying there, if I understand you correctly, is that putting a levy aside for this sort of thing now limits our options in the future to provide a levy for something else later. To a citizen of the city, a levy is a levy. And if a levy is going to the general fund to keep it afloat, then it doesn't matter if it's today or 5 years from now. I have more thoughts. Hold on. Where did I leave it? I guess I lost the train there. Yeah, hopefully it comes back in a minute.
All right, Alex and Maryland.
I just want to commend you for putting this forward. Perfectly honest, like I am personally completely in favor of this and so this is Alex, this is not, just
Right.
clarified 100 times. So, but I am absolutely in favor of doing this because I do think it's important and I think it's good to reference Vision 2040 and all those pieces, which were also community engagement, huge
I did
community
my
engagement.
homework.
Yeah, no, exactly, right, and so, but how, and then the big but, is of course that it got voted back. It's like,
Right.
yeah, can I yield back to him for just for?
Yeah, I
I
did
remember.
Remember your question? Okay.
Two things that I remember. One, the community overwhelmingly voted no on a 1.065 million levy that is 4 times as much as this one. So I think that 75% drop or whatever it is there will create a little more leeway with people. And two, the final thing is we don't have to decide this here. That's the thing that I really want to stress, because we're trying to resolve something that council's going to have to resolve here by figuring out, what the amount will be, whether we like levies or not. We at the budget committee, I believe, are just here to recommend that. And so I hate to dump that on council, but it also, yeah, sorry, but But I at least wanna give them the option to go figure this out, because it would be happening very quickly if we just were deciding tonight, like, that would be kind of crazy. So, you know, I just wanna leave that option open. So, those are my other two thoughts, thank you.
Carolyn? The bond that failed, what was that, $1 and
Well, the net
87
gain is-
cents.
It's actually a net gain of 0.6 cents.
I would love to be able to say we can solve all this with another $5 fee, but I can't make that pencil out based on what we had for 3 things, which was museum, parks and libraries. And to take care of 2 of those instead of the third thing with parks, I can't make that that equate to what we were going for a bond for. I do agree that if we go for a bond in the future, that probably doing it on behalf of bolstering the general fund is probably the best idea. Although I know it's not as sexy as saying this is for these particular things. But we did pass a bond 11 years ago, and it was exactly that way. So I would vote yes on this if I thought that $5 would solve our problems, but I don't think it will.
Yes.
Just to clarify, Marilyn, the difference between a bond and a local operating
Oh,
levy.
you're right.
I just, because some folks may be confused
You're right,
by
that
that,
was a
bonds
GO
are for
bond.
capital purposes
Correct.
only. Thank you. Sorry, I don't.
That's what you're here for.
Jessica?
City Manager West, I asked this question last year and there wasn't an answer for it then, but is the state of Oregon doing anything to address the issues that measures 5 and 40 have imposed on all cities across the state?
The state of Oregon is not. The League of Oregon Cities, however, is working really, really hard to educate the legislators on where we're all sitting. We have individual legislators who are fabulous, but as a body, many of them don't understand what's happening at the city level. League of Oregon Cities, when I was on the board, brought forward an extremely expensive prospect of consultants coming in, talking to the entire state in little parts and finding out what revenue generating things the communities would be comfortable with. They looked at everything from Measure 5 and 50, sales tax, local sales tax, all the type levies, everything you can think of. Throughout Oregon, anything to do with sales tax was really not accepted. And the change to Measure 5 and 50 was not strongly supported. It is a constitutional change. So it is like the levy that we talked about. We have to educate and continue to educate. And as Mayor Schwartzler indicated, it's going to probably take the city starting to lose everything before people start to understand the difference between what we're getting and what we should, I would say should, but what we could be receiving based on the value of the homes and why we can't continue to provide services. So long answer, state no, League of Oregon Cities, and cities, yes.
Yes, one follow-up question.
Yes.
And I'm asking these questions, one, because I want to know, but also I think it helps with the transparency and helps the city and anybody who's watching understand this. Are there any other states that have similar things to Measure 5 and 50 that are causing the same problems?
So we're relatively unique. California has something similar, but the main difference with California is they reset on sale. So what happens in California is a home, we'll just say it's worth $100,000. And grandma lives in it, right? And she lives in it until she passes away. And then it's in LA. And then she passes away, family gets it, they sell it. It jumps up in value to $2.5 million. The next person buying it gets it at that value. So that value is captured at some point in time. In Oregon, that never happened. So a house are not for new homes, right? Because there's a very complex calculation on new homes. I'm not gonna go into it. You might.
I don't.
Yeah, no, it's very complex and you get approximately 40-ish%, rather than the whole percentage that you could get. So other than California, that's the only one I know of, and again, the big change is that reset on sale. If we could get a reset on sale, it would be incredibly helpful. You think about cities like Independence, where in the nineties, no one wanted to live here. It hadn't become what it is now, and so the home values were low. And they only increase at 3% per year. So those are just going up like this. Based upon 5 and 50. Actual value, because now everybody wants to live here, because it's incredibly, it's way up here. And the people who are buying those homes expect a very high quality service, but they're not paying. Nor is anyone who was here, they're not paying for that level of service because of that.
Thank you.
Shannon.
I just wanna follow up on that because, I went to an LLC meeting last week. And I'll be happy to share the materials with you. It was all about 5 and 50, that meeting. And they are socializing the idea of reset and sale, but they think it's gonna be about 7 years before there's any movement on that.
Dana.
Just for clarification on that, to my understanding, measure 5 and 50, and also your property taxes will go up if you do more than $25,000 or $15,000 of repairs to your home, and also on your home, that's correct?
No, so new homes, those are the ones that are calculated and they're calculated. So, yeah, so you're not getting, when people say, well, it's $400,000 home and you should be getting all of this money, you're not, because they calculate this calculation so that they're paying approximately what a house from the nineties would have been paid. That's in that. Well,
Since the eighties, so
That's
basically
on
they
new
take the home
builds.
value, like a 3-2 house in the eighties, and they add 3% for each year, and that's the tax.
yes,
So they take the eighties value.
nineties,
90s.
yeah, the nineties value, and then it's very convoluted, and then they take, whatever, and then that 3%, and then they put it on the 3%.
That's not my experience. I built my house and the county came in and said my house was worth more than I paid for the building of the house. And my property taxes are well in the $7,000 per year.
It's not the valuation of your house, counselor. It's the calculation of the taxes.
Based
No, right, but that, it's,
I'm just saying it's I would be very grateful if my property taxes were from the 1990s, but they're not.
Yeah.
We're not 3%. To the, but the evaluations of the 90s.
Right, I think we're getting off subject here too. We're talking about this particular question. If there's not a motion, then I think we discussed this to its full
I can make
extent.
the motion if there's any vote for it, but see if we get a second. I move to increase, or
Nathan,
I put my thumb.
Okay. Alright.
Not to scoop you, but just to say something. Perhaps if we discuss some of the rest of the question quickly, not deliberate too much. We might get some more fidelity on this question. It's kind of the starting point of the revenue generation. There's a lot of interesting conversation ahead of us.
So the one I have, so next one is available that would allow utility use for ferry.
So, I mean, I can, if you'd like, I have some comments on this.
Okay,
Tying utility rates to certain criteria like zoning or property values throws them into a category as a tax and then makes those fees subject to measures 5 and 50. So we need to be really careful not to get into that. We are already using tiered rates to reflect usage in the water. So, versus the flat rates that we used to charge for water.
And this was my question, so I'm
Okay.
to clarify. I probably shouldn't have said utility fees. I'm talking about fees like the public safety.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense? So it's
sure.
not charging for water service. It's the discussion we're having now about potential fees. Can they be strategically implemented rather than just everybody gets what's on the
Yeah, so some fees lend themselves well to that. Planning and land use fees lend themselves to a more I guess, a focused, based, for example, I've worked with communities that have a subdivision fee that is a base fee plus X dollars per lot of the development. Some just do a base fee for a subdivision, so it's across the board how they're implemented. Based on your second question, our fee schedule could use a fresh look. Now, the building inspection fees were reset about 3 years ago, from what I understand, and they're mostly driven by the state anyway. But the rest of our fee schedule needs a look. And outside of the land use fees, we're probably talking about what I term budget dust. There's not a lot there, right? But the land use fees have the potential to be significant depending on the level of development and activity in the city. And I would think that a fresh look at the land use fees would be a good and pertinent thing to at least recover cost of service. You know, we've worked with folks to do rate studies that have been based on, you know, how many hours it takes at what rate of the people it takes to do that work. And that becomes kind of the benchmark at where you look at setting the fees. I don't know if that answers your question.
A little, yeah. Like,
Like, I think he was asking about like the police fee, that's the public safety fee that's on the utility bills, if that could be somehow graduated or scaled, or any other fee that was put on.
It could be implemented any way, I suppose, if the council wanted it.
just wondering, like, what are the mechanisms available to you and the city staff that you can target a fee structure based on any number of criteria that might the council might have?
From an operational standpoint, it would be, I just have to say it would be somewhat difficult.
Okay.
Because, let's say it was based on income. We wanted to
I don't
graduate
even
it.
know if that was possible.
Right.
Just putting it out.
Yeah.
Right, so if you wanted to base it on income, how do we know?
Right,
Do they self-report?
right.
There's an option, if you get SNAP, then we could take a look at that. Because someone else has already determined that they have eligibility. But then, do they have to prove it every month? Does my staff have to check every month? So it is theoretically possible. It is operationally difficult.
Sorry,
No,
I
it's fine.
wasn't sure my answer was
We're just worded.
Right, Jessica does have a question about it.
For looking at the land use fees and, you know, you making the comment that you think that some of them are a little outdated and could definitely use some fresh eyes. What could we do to, like, we just express interest in seeing that in the future? Like, how can we actually make time, carve out time, either for you or for something after you retire, for that to be looked at?
My guess is the council has received that message now. Yeah.
And be explicit when.
No, I
possible.
appreciate that.
I think, you know,
But to direct that to happen is not the purview of this committee. And to set a revenue number in this budget based on not having, and not having that as a basis would be, it would be nonsensical.
All right,
Thank you.
you want to further discuss for the next?
We can keep going.
Yeah. Municipal fees currently have a potential to be. Sorry.
It's unrelated to the current topic, so I'll make it quick. I just want to answer the community members' question. How do businesses get involved if they want to get involved? Who would they contact?
Involved in.
In the Port of Dawn, I know it's off topic, but I want to get that answer.
You wanna take that?
I mean, so the short answer would be, I'd say, well, two things. One, I know council just created an ad hoc committee to look at, essentially explore options. And so I think, you know, talking to the people on that committee would be a good possibility.
So if they walked in the front door, who would they talk to?
They would talk to me.
To you?
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And I would also say,
on the committee as far as liaison, and I know that it's still a public meeting, it still gets published notes and agendas, and public can show up to those meetings as well.
When are those?
To be determined, I think.
Yeah, okay.
And there are
It was
four,
formed last night.
yeah,
Okay. Fresh. Alright.
yeah, the council approved an ad hoc committee last night and 4 of the 5 members are in this room.
Excellent. Thank you.
And then I was just checking with communications, there's also the website, you can access, there's a webpage for it, and then there's volunteer, opportunities on.
There's an actual webpage for the.
For Fourth
Yes,
of July.
for 4th of July.
Independence Day.
Okay, cool, thank you very much.
Okay,
So I think we covered number 2.
yeah, I think we did.
So number 3,
Audit of the utility field.
yeah, so our financial statement auditors look at utilities and they do some testing around if, you know, if what we're reporting and reporting as revenue is materially complete and accurate. We in finance track monthly statistics and look for outliers and trends in what's accounts receivable doing relative to, you know, same time last year. What are billings and collections doing relative to each other? Are we seeing an increase in the aging? So are we getting more delinquencies? All of that stuff we track month to month. And then we also have had rate studies fairly recently, and that gives us a level of confidence, I believe, that what we're charging for the water is appropriate. So I think we've kind of covered it cradle to grave, that at least I have a high level of confidence that we're collecting what we should be collecting for the water and sewer and storm. The fourth question about visibility on tax exempt entities. I believe we have the ability to find out what not-for-profits are operating within independence in terms of having the visibility on all of them. I don't know that we do at this point.
If I could interrupt a little bit here.
Please do.
I do a regular survey of all the nonprofit groups that are in 97351 and 97361. And I keep a regular list of those to share with whoever wants them, because I belong to MBA, IDA, and the Chamber Board, and all 3 organizations benefit from that. So I'll share if you'd like.
Wonderful. And then the last question, I
Well,
think,
Alex has a
I'm
question about
sorry.
that.
Please.
Assume what the question is, so right, who's not paying property tax?
No, I mean, for the nonprofit question.
Yeah.
Well, it's very amateur citizen research.
Sure.
I discovered a program called Pilot, I don't know if you're familiar with, but basically they're voluntary payments in lieu of tax.
Sure.
So nonprofits are not required to pay them, but given advocacy and education, they could, and we could have a program designed to receive those pilots.
I would submit that probably most of them don't own their own buildings and are instead renting. And so that tax is getting covered by the property owner. Well, and I don't know how sometimes, excuse me, but I can't, personally, it's hard for me to think that that would be a windfall, right? So just
Still churches on their property? They have to.
fair enough, yeah. No, that's fair. I actually wasn't even considering church, I was just considering a traditional like 501c3.
And to be fair, these programs are at least marginally popular in large cities where you have like universities and museums, so, you know, very big institutions.
Yeah.
So the likelihood of them being prolific in our community, not as high,
Yeah,
but
sure.
you know, we also very small budget.
It's a lot smaller gap to them.
Yeah.
Alright, thanks.
That was it.
That's it. Okay. Jessica's question.
Is there a mechanism for collecting voluntary payments just from anybody in the community? Like, you know, the levy didn't pass, but there's lots of people that would have supported the levy, maybe they would still want to make a contribution.
We absolutely will take your money.
But is it easy to?
Yeah, what's the
Yeah,
mechanism?
I want
That's
a
a good
QR
question.
code that I can just scan and go like this.
It's like a Venmo.
We'll have it tomorrow, and that's what it is.
Yeah, Manuel says we can do that.
Is it even like a water bill?
But
That would go
but
to water.
honestly, it is like, the easier you make it for me, the more likely I am to do it.
Exactly.
But we can't plan. like, wait, again.
Oh,
we have to-
yeah.
We have to tie a budget number to this.
Yeah, sorry.
And so we can't predict, right, like how, what kind of revenue would that bring in? Especially if we're gonna try to put it in with this year's budget, because we haven't started the program yet. But I agree, I think it's something I've heard from a lot of people that are willing, like, I'd happily make a donation every month. I think the difficult part is figuring out how to collect it and then what does that prove to us? Hard to do that in operations.
And
Well, and Friends of the Museum, right, and like they take donations. So,
But like say, for example, if there was a voluntary opt-in dollar amount fee to add to my utility bill, I would sign up for that. And I know that it's a little bit outside the purview of this specific meeting and what we're here for, but this is, you know, the city manager and the staff hear us when we talk, and this is kind of like, this is where I get involved. I know the city council gets to take this forward after the budget committee convenes or, votes on the budget, but this is my chance to say like,
Yeah,
here's my
yeah.
ideas. So I understand that we're trying to keep the conversation going and, do what we're here to do, but this is, I think, still a valuable time for community members to throw in those ideas.
If I can add a
Yes.
little bit, if I
Yes,
can
go
share. So that was a discussion that we had at one of our town halls. What would you call it? Meeting, town hall, what had it, was an opt-in, and there are some people who are interested, from an operational standpoint. We can't rely on it, right? Because you may opt in this month, but not next month. And so we basically have to set it aside and kind of hold it until the end of the year, when we know how much we have. So we will take all the money, no problem. But just know that operationally, it's not gonna solve the problem, and we have to utilize it differently because we can't rely on it, right? We can't plan to pay leftovers with it.
Yeah. But if it could be like, collected for the purpose of the following fiscal year, and then it just collects in a pot, and the next fiscal year, cool, we've got this extra money that we can use towards our food and library.
It can be done.
Makes sense?
I just wanted to say, good idea would be putting a QR code on your water bill with some kind of notification as to what it's for. We get that kind of stuff when we file our taxes, if you want to submit, such and such whatever donations to whatever organization at the end of your tax bill, something like that would be amazing. I see that. Also, I just wanted to point out, I don't know, maybe there's confusion. Even if we did do this next year, the budget that we're working with now is balanced. We have a balanced budget, so we're not looking for that idea, otherwise we don't have a city budget. So we do have some time to implement that. It would be a great idea.
We just use it differently. So, right, I just want to make sure
Yeah.
that no one thought we'd use it to fund a new position at the library. Because
Well, and to that point, like when you said Friends of the Library and Friends of the Museum Society, they're nonprofit. A lot of those funds cannot be used for paying for a position, because you're city employees. So we're talking about keeping the lights on. It needs to come to the revenue of the tax base to the city, right, to keep the lights on. Those organizations that do that.
Right.
Alright, I think we're done with it. So now the next one is building inspections. Current usage fees are accurately calculated, but income potential is inaccurate. So question, I don't really understand it.
What I'm saying is that.
They go down the list.
Is what I was saying is that when we don't know every single year how much we're going to gain in building costs and building inspections and SDCs. We do know how much we're paying every year in maintaining a job that has building inspections. So that's why I'm just saying it's not always. It's not, you can't really. Especially since we increased our SDCs, we just don't know how much we're going to be using these things. So my thought was to transfer all inspections to Polk County, who I called and asked to see if they do this for other cities, and they said, yes, they do building inspections for other cities. They currently do our inspections for electrical work. They just lost a position to the state, came and took over one of their inspectors, so they're actively hiring, and I thought this would be a great transition into a Polk County job. It would reduce staffing levels by 1.5 full-time employee and save quite a bit of money for the general fund. That was my thought.
Would you like some clarity from staff?
Yes, please.
So in this budget, the expenditures identified for the building inspection department are the 241,550. The revenue that's also identified in that department is about $220,000. So in this budget, to eliminate the building inspection department would be a net $21,000 addition to contingency in the general fund.
And I know Councilor Roden spoke with the office manager over at Polk County. I spoke with the director. And the director indicated that they have concerns about taking over the City of Independence building inspection.
So we're indicating savings by just, scrapping this line item. I'm assuming the county would charge us for that service.
They would charge the building.
We'd be out of business.
They would,
It would all go through.
it would all go through there, and then I was thinking also because
But then would Polk County then charge us for said inspections?
they would get the revenue.
They would take all of the revenue.
The building permit fee, they keep that, they bill it to the builder.
And I was also thinking when I put this forth, not only would the savings come from financially, it would come from our staff is overwhelmed, or not overwhelmed, the staff is burdened by the permitting process. And they use time, they all said that each of them take time to do that, and it's complicated, and it's manual, and it's taking away their time. And I thought if Polk County took it over and they did the permitting process, which they're all well versed at, that would give our staff the opportunity to put their visions into other things. Just trying to think of other options that we could do.
Kate?
But we wouldn't be able to totally give up the permitting, right? We would still have it for like the land use planning.
I don't know where you're using it for land use planning.
I was just asking if we wouldn't necessarily give up the entire permitting process, right? If our staff would maybe still have to be involved in it, for maybe a land use or planning aspect of it.
Dana's next, and then Alex.
Why does Polk County, this is, I guess, kind of beside the point, but why did Polk County not seem keen about taking it over?
That would be a conversation to be had at a later time.
Okay. And on top of that, just to make that clear, we would lose $220,000 in revenue to get rid of a $220,000 position essentially. So
Potentially, because the revenue is dependent, correct? And
It's an estimate.
what we, yes, and what we pay every year to have a staff position and what other staff members are doing is a constant.
I would just want to say that I think that reducing staffing further isn't necessarily going to resolve those issues with staffing in terms of people having to come down on each other. And I hate to say that, but I think it's true. So that's just my 2 cents.
Alex?
I just want to clarify too, the e-permitting piece was from my understanding is that the finance, the e-permitting
Yeah.
piece was for the staff time on finance was sort of like where the time was, not the building, like not the permitting for the building. Is that correct? No, that's, I'm clarifying.
Sorry, just would you?
Yeah, so. I think that we're all kind of understand the question, keep on moving on with stuff, I guess. Information technology, share IT costs with MUN. Want me to read the whole thing? Negotiate this change as soon as possible and eliminate the city of Kaiser in place 2. Staff for a population 4 times larger than that of Independence, estimate savings change around 140,000.
Do you want staff clarity on this, Chair?
I guess.
Well, so again, there's $170,000 identified in revenue for this department, 282,600 total expense. So the net expense for this department in this budget is 112,600. That's, I mean, those are the numbers that are in the budget. I'm not sure how I think I know how you came up with the number for the savings, but I'm not completely sure how you came up with that.
Well, I took the cost of how much it's gonna cost to have these employees, and I was looking at it, as if we split it between share the cost with Monmouth. If we could have, if we're already doing IT and we're sharing with Monmouth, why not just have the two people who cover the whole cities and do the work, or we're already sharing, so share the cost.
We're not. We're not.
That's the proposed in this piece.
We're talking about it, but we're not.
No, I am, because it's not a good, it's like not a good thing.
Well, and from my understanding, when these stuff, they are sharing they're paying us and they're gonna
That's
pay his
the
time.
proposal.
Proposed,
The
yeah.
one that's city budget still has to go through, or maybe they did finish their.
They did.
Okay, fair enough, so now we are sharing it, so that is
Yeah.
the position being shared,
So
Yeah,
if
well,
we can
so we are
if I
sharing.
can just say one thing,
potentially.
I'm not trying to have people slam their phones at me. I'm just trying to bring forth ideas that we can discuss. That's all I'm trying to do. So I'm not trying to be mean to anybody, I'm just trying to get to a point. I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings. So if I come off that I'm hurting people's feelings, I apologize. It's not me. I'm just trying to look at ways we can try to go forward with our city and manage this successfully.
Nathan?
I guess my first part was, I think I already answered because you said they passed their budget.
I believe I heard they passed their budget, am I correct, Jason? Yes.
Yeah, they did. Right. And the second part, just what you said. I totally on board with you. I'm not feeling offended by anything. But I will also point out that it's entirely possible that being disagreed with, just being disagreed with. Right? Ideas stand on their own two legs, and if they don't stand, and because the majority of people here don't like it, so we could process.
Let's keep on moving. The next one was just to close the museum. Do not merge it. I understand the numbers for that one. The budget that we have does move it. With the numbers that we have, we'll retain the museum. And move it to the library. And I do think that the people in the community have talked, they do want to save some part of the museum. The loss of it completely would be irrevocable and is a very drastic measure. That is my 2 cents on that. I will state that you put forward. Is there any other comments on it? Ethan?
I want to be careful, I'm not talking about museum here, this brings up another point that I've been thinking about since this whole thing started, because you're right that in addition to the library and the parks, especially police, like, and all the city services, there's a huge, I feel, personal disconnect sometimes, and I'm speaking as a citizen, because I see it in my fellow citizens, like, we don't want a fee, we don't want tax levies, levies or whatever, but we really, really want our services, right? There's a huge disconnect here. I'm just gonna name the elephant in the room, which is a lack of education and engagement from the citizens. I'm just gonna say it, because I'm one of them, and I used to be very uneducated. After being in this committee for 3+ years and a bunch of other boards, I consider myself very well educated now, and it takes time to do that. I don't know how we solve that problem in this form, but I've got an issue of like, pick one, like, you can't have both, so I think, in the long term, the services for the city is what it's, sorry.
Sorry, Shannon.
I agree with what Nathan is saying, but I feel the city has done a very good job of pushing information out there.
I agree.
The problem is, and I'm not blaming people just to blame people, I understand where they're coming from. We can't get people to absorb that information and act on it, that's where our issues lie, and that's a very hard nut to crack. I mean, I don't think we can do any more communication than we are doing. I don't think we can have any more boards, commissions, and committees than we have. It was a leap of faith last night to approve the ad hoc committee for the Independence Day Commission, but there's enough, I think, enough groundswell activity that we can support that, but, you know, the residents of the community have got to want to get involved, period. And, I understand people are working, everybody in this room is working or has family or has some other distraction in their life. And I just feel like communities don't wanna get involved, they want the services, they wanna sit back and get the services and know that they're there, but they don't wanna do the work, and I think more so than saying no to the levy, it's more about not wanting to get involved. And that's what we need to figure out how to fix that problem.
Bill was next.
So when I first decided to run for city council, I was walking around town, was talking to neighbors, I wasn't knocking on doors or anything, but I said something really stupid to someone because he said, well, what do you think about this? And I said, well, I don't really know. He says, if you're running for city council. And I was really embarrassed to hear that. And then I met Evan and we went door knocking. So if you guys want to learn how to do it, go door knocking with this guy. So I just want to say that, really just, it's getting involved in your community is the only way to learn. And so I threw my hat in, and I too have learned a ton in the last 3 years. And I want to commend you for publicly saying you changed your mind, because that's a really hard thing to say. Awesome. Now my question. Your proposal that you said earlier, was that for this fiscal year? Because that's what we're here for tonight. Or is it for next year?
It would be for this one, so it would be a tough question to answer.
Right, Jessica.
Just to piggyback off of what Nathan and Shannon were saying, I think that it should be stated that there are a lot of people on social media that blur information or accidentally or sometimes intentionally cause divisiveness. So if people are interested in getting involved, I've always wanted to be involved in my community. When I moved to Independence, I think I just had to like speak the words, I want to be involved, and then the opportunities presented themselves. I think you're actually the one that was like, hey, I'm.
It just happened.
So it is, if you are interested in getting involved, it is very, very, very easy. It's so easy and it's so welcoming to be involved in this community. But I ask that you consider the channels in which you are trying to do that. Contacting anybody through the city or the council is a really great way to do that. Be careful with what you read on social media.
Dana?
I don't like talking about this because this isn't really our purview here, but I think messaging might be a large problem of why people aren't getting involved, and I also think a lot of people just don't want to be involved. I think that's why they pay taxes. That's me as a community member, I pay taxes, deal with it, you know, that's my attitude. So there's probably a lot of expectation for more coming from committees like this and council and staff than is.
And you're the poster child for someone who did get involved.
Yes, I mean, I'm the kind of person who, you know, I'm gonna step up, like if I wanna figure it out, let's solve it. But not everybody's like that, and I completely respect that, you know, I totally understand people who don't want to be involved. They wanna throw money at the problem and not deal with it. So I don't wanna attack community members here for, you know, not being involved, and I think that kind of messaging is why a lot of people don't get involved. So.
Kate?
No, I appreciate that, and I guess I just wanna say, kind of tying on to your comment about social media, that it's incumbent on all of us to be good stewards of this information and to be presenting accurate information out into the community. Because doing otherwise is really harmful, and it just keeps perpetuating the rumors and what's being paid, what's not being paid, how decisions are being made. So really, I think it starts with us here at the table of making sure that we're presenting accurate information. We may not agree with it, we may not always think it's the best way to go, but clarity starts with us and how we share that.
Right. Is there any more discussion on the museum closing? Alright. Cut the community development, delay the Talmadge plan or allow a private enterprise to take it over, postpone downtown parking initiatives, eliminate all funding for the trolley system, and let charities continue their existing routes.
I need to give one piece of information, we're required by law to have a planning department,
Mhm.
so. Or a planner,
To
or
provide planning services.
I couldn't hear that, I have hearing problems.
Oh, it's the next one on your.
Oh, okay.
and I apologize, I was not looking out. I
Oh,
know better,
okay.
I know
Oh, you
better,
didn't hear me. You
I
didn't
know
hear her.
better than that.
We are legally obligated to have a planning department.
To have
Okay,
planning,
so have
provide
planning,
planning
provide planning, sorry, provide planning. Whether we have someone in-house or we contract service that position, we are legally obligated to have that.
And we have those numbers if you would like them.
All right, Alex. Or, I'm sorry.
The things that are mentioned on, that we're under the community development one now,
Yeah.
I'm missing some of the sound over here with and fans and so on. Anyway, Sean, most of the things that are mentioned here are being funded by grants and outside money.
Yeah, I mean, yes, funded by grants, it does still take staff time to do the work.
Right.
To manage the project, so.
But we're not, and do we at this point pay anything at all towards the trolley? No,
Grants, it's purely funded.
it's all
by
grants, okay. Okay, so this, cutting some of the things that are suggested in here don't necessarily affect the budget one way or the other. Other than grants in, grants out.
Yeah, and staff time.
And I also wanted to say, I really appreciate that this budget was presented this year without expectations or hopes for capital improvement projects that would depend on grant money coming in. This is a much more realistic presentation.
Alex, do you have a question?
Yeah, can staff clarify the Talmadge plan piece? Because that's, I mean, as far as my understanding of planning commission is sort of the zoning scheme rather than an actual. There's no investment being made, staff time obviously has been spent on it, but presumably, I think it was the ODOT grant, the TGM Transportation Growth Management Grant that funded the plan initially. So staff time was the only thing used, but now it's just a kind of like, I know we looked at planning commission for zoning and like rezoning, things like that, but that's functionally.
Yeah, essentially, I mean, the bulk of the work was creating what's called a concept plan, which is sort of taking an area and saying, what do we want to see here? You know, and sort of how do we adjust the zoning or do other things to create, you know, that pattern of development that we would like to see. That work is essentially done at this point. Now it's really just sort of the implementation aspect, which, as you identified, is really, it's a little bit of rezoning. It's some pretty minor work. And then, you know, there are a lot of infrastructure improvements that are identified in the plan. Those would essentially be funded through grants. We would have to go after grants for those because we don't have the sources of funding for the kind of money that would take.
Right, thank you.
All right, Evan.
My question. Third plan. Thank you.
Okay, Dawn.
My point is that staff is overwhelmed, staff has too much on their plate. Staff is doing a lot. If we could narrow down what staff is doing, they could concentrate on more core issues to our community. This again was just an idea of how to do that. We shouldn't have our city manager, our economic developer, and our finance department working 60, 70, 80 hours per week. If they're doing that right now, even though our budget is balanced, we're not providing for the health of the people who run this community. And we're not providing for our police department. I'm just looking at ways that we can trim down the work on their plate so that they can focus on things, so they can have a life outside of this room too.
Tina and Alex, you're after.
Yeah, do we know how much staff time it would save by delaying this plan and postponing downtown parking initiatives?
I mean, I'd have a hard time coming up with I wouldn't want to just throw a number out off the top of the head, but I would be saying, I mean, or less per project probably. I mean, I don't know how much, you know, Fred's the one who does it. But I mean,
Time or?
Yeah, this is for Fred.
yeah, this is Fred, our
Yeah,
planner.
right.
So, you know, but I mean, it's, like I say, you know, the work now is pretty minor. You know, developing the plan, that definitely was, you know, was a fair bit of work, but now it's just really staff report presentation at planning commission presentation to council, so it's not a significant undertaking really.
Okay, because I do agree, you know, given the crunch that our city's been under, staff has likely not had the time to develop plans or seek grants or other things that could potentially pull us out of this sort of pit that we're in. And you know, as we whittle down, it's just getting harder. So I just want to speak to that. I do think that we should be looking potentially for some ways to free up time in the way that's most effective possible if we see it.
Alex?
I also wanted to ask, about like contract planning. I remember that was when when we moved here, we had a contract planner. Would love to get maybe, and I know it's ballpark numbers, we haven't prepared it, but just like actual, like what that costs relative to having a planner in-house.
Yeah, no, and I actually, I appreciate you bringing that up. So we did, over a period of about 4 years, from 2016 to 2020, we did have a contract planner. This was before Fred. And honestly, we hired Fred. We put out for a staff position in planning because we weren't happy with the work the contractors were doing. So we paid AKS Engineering to do the contract planning work for us. Looks like average was about $117 an hour for the contractor, which Fred comes in with benefits around $65 an hour. And then of course, you know, it's billable hours. So average annually, we spent about $160,000 a year with AKS on the planning services. And the problem there also is, you know, the contractor, again, it's billable hours. They're checking boxes on the applications and just sort of pushing them through, pushing them out the door. They don't really kind of provide the more holistic perspective of really kind of what, how does this fit with the community vision? How does this fit with the bigger picture of what we're trying to achieve here? They're less available for answering questions. They're less available for really kind of working in the back and forth with developers. That really makes projects actually succeed. And so that was really, I think, kind of where, and they also don't staff the city commissions. So like planning commission, historic preservation commission, contractor won't staff that. So that then comes back to other staff roles that have to do that. So that was kind of that was basically why the decision was made to put out for a planner position.
Thank you, Jessica.
Sean, if you don't mind clarifying, please, if Fred no longer engaged in the brief and that kind of stuff, would that mean that we would no longer be eligible for grants to then fund those projects?
We essentially, if there wasn't time, we just wouldn't apply. These grants are kind of typically out there and available. And so we're usually making a determination saying, hey, does this line up with what we want to do? Or is there are we trying to do something that a grant, you know, would fund? And then, okay, then let's figure out the project, figure out how much time it takes and if it's worth going after.
So if we cut that time as was being proposed, then we would lose the opportunity to apply for those grants?
Potentially, but honestly, for what's left with those projects, like I said, it's really just implementation. There aren't any grants available for that. It would more be for like new projects, which honestly, so for example, we're reviewing infill standards right now as part of the housing production strategy. And then there'll be other things probably that the state is going to push down on us that need to happen. Those may or may not come with grants that will help make that happen or not. But those are the kind of projects that we look for grant funding to say, okay, you guys have told us we need to evaluate how we can offer more options of housing. Okay, you're also giving us a grant to be able to have a consultant do that, and we're just doing the process. And so that's kind of how we're approaching those things.
Yep.
I just wanted to say that our focus tonight should be balancing the budget, talking about parks and trolleys is really off topic, and trying to tell the city manager how to manage her operations. I don't think is appropriate either. We should really be focusing on balancing the budget.
Yeah, I had a very similar comment to that, staff and projects are based on operations and also in terms of Talmadge, we want from an economic development standpoint, we want that to get developed. I mean, that brings revenue into the community. So I think stopping work on it I mean, it is, private enterprises are gonna be the ones that are gonna come in and do that, so it's like, to Sean's point, shouldn't really be taking up much more staff time at this point. I think it's a positive thing for our community.
Dawn? Are you? Sure, something. Oh, James.
So just real quick, cost benefit analysis, if we reduce their time focusing on these things, would it, over say 10 years? Would the 1 year setback on implementing this plan in terms of tax revenue be less than the money we saved this year? That's kind of a tricky question.
Yeah, everything's kind of going still.
Right, no, I understand, I'm just asking clarifying
Yeah.
question.
Who's that?
If
So
it was-
basically, this question was about cutting our planner. And we're getting rid of,
The delay the college plans
yeah.
are allowed.
Well, it says
Well, that's a policy.
community development.
Oh, well, I'm skipping that one. but-
Oh,
okay.
The delay of the tax plan, we're
What?
talking about the delay of the tax.
Yeah, if we push that off till next year and he didn't work on it at all, would the amount of time he spends writing grants or doing whatever to raise revenue for the city outweigh the long-term tax revenue implications?
Okay,
Well,
so,
first, I think that's the policy.
Oh.
Sorry, can you answer that?
It's a really tough question to answer on this one, I understand.
So I mean, the short answer to your question is, these are things that don't need to happen right away. And so we typically would just fit this in, you know, like, okay, we haven't gotten a development in for a while, we've got some time, let's work on zone change for Central Town, which I mean, that's essentially how these kind of things tend to go.
Okay, cool, thank you.
What I was gonna say, 'cause I
Yeah.
forgot. I was just listening to what staff, if we, it doesn't have to be these things, but if we. But it's not balanced, it's not written sufficiently so that our police department is fully funded. And that the core services of our community are fully funded into the future, it's not. And so that's why I'm looking at ways that we can look and change this budget so that we can better provide for our future. That's our goal here too.
Yeah.
Last year, we made the mistake of pushing forward our budget, hoping that the levies would pass, and now to this point where we're in the precipice. So we're here now, and so I put forth these ideas so that we can really fix these.
Oh, no, okay. Kathy,
I was gonna say, but, Fred not working on the trolley doesn't fund the library. If he works 10 hours a month less on the trolley, there isn't, that money doesn't magically go to the museum. So I guess I'm not seeing the logic behind delaying the townage plan.
Fred's working 70 hours a week, and 10 of them then he's working 60 hours a week on other core services that we need. And these don't have to be the exact. Like, I agree, this can be operational where it goes to back to the City Manager West, and we decide what we need to, like, we need to bunker down and focus on core spending. And if city manager says, oh, this has already been done, that's fine, then I'll remove the idea. But we need to start trimming things so that we're more focused and we have a spearhead and not this broad swaths of things that we're doing. And then to continue on with levels of staffing that they can't sustain. So we can't just sit here and say this budget's balanced, we're good to go. We're not good to go. We're putting our police department in jeopardy. We're putting our community in jeopardy. I'm listening to what they're saying. They're tired. We have to figure out how to do this. City Manager West shouldn't be working 80 hours a week. We need to start trimming things down. If we don't have money to add staff, we need to vocalize what we're spending our stuff on, what our time is on, so that we can do it. And I agree, maybe the things I put forth aren't the absolute best options. But policy is going to have to be changed so that they can focus on what they need to focus on.
Nathan?
I hear what you're saying. I agree in many respects. none of the positions or the suggestions you put down here today have any like budget line items associated with them. So like talking about the tax overworked status of city staff. There is literally no legal mechanism that this body can do that would affect that at all. At all. We are not an operational committee in charge of city employees. There's no budget line items involved in any of these suggestions. So we aren't disagreeing with your premise, but this is not the mechanism.
So if you don't like what I'm doing, then other people need to put forth ideas.
We're not arguing.
We're not arguing.
I'm making a statement. Maybe worse.
Jessica.
Request for clarification and also just a comment on what's happening right now. The police department, that the purpose of the public safety fee is to help the police department get to proper operation levels. Correct. Correct, okay, so that's great that we have that, I'm glad that we have that. I hear your point, but also, just last week, you strongly were saying that the city needs to continue to be involved in Indie Days, despite the fact that all of the staff have said how much time is being put into that. So I think that the city is trying to address the very same things that you're trying to bring up as well, is that they're trying to find a way to free up some of the staff time so that they can focus on those super critical things that we need to focus on.
So you brought part of what I said last week, but I did also say that I don't think we need to find ways of eliminating finance department from being done in Independence Days. We need to find ways of getting less staff down there. We need to make Independence Day smaller. I said all those things too.
No. Shannon.
We all know the situation of the police department, and I hope Chief Benos knows how much we care about the long shifts and the work that your sergeant and lieutenant are also doing, and you're doing too. But that is a decision for City Manager West to make. We are not in the position to tell her how to run the city. We hired a capable, able person, and we need to let her do her job. And like everybody has said tonight, we have a balanced budget in front of us. We had discussions, you were not at a work session where we had discussions about the museum and the library. We have given the city, and they have taken from our vision plans and our goals and objectives and everything, and given us a balanced budget that reflects that. If we're gonna nitpick every little detail of this budget, we'll be here for days and weeks on end. I think, you keep saying that the mayor pushed the budget through last year. She did not push the budget through. If we had taken the budget, the day that City Manager West gave us the budget, if we had signed on the dotted line right then and there and approved it, that would not be rubber stamping the budget because it reflects our values. We need to stop saying that. That kind of rhetoric is what causes issues with the residents.
I just.
Evan.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is, City Manager West, is this our 6th budget meeting?
It's
Fifth?
including.
And all have been 2 to 3 hours long, so we're roughly 20 hours into budget meetings. How on earth is that a rubber? So.
But we haven't changed anything. That's how it's working.
Well, because maybe we understand the dynamics of what the budget is. We've asked hundreds of questions. There's 24 questions right here that were asked tonight. We're not rubber stamping anything. What I see is a budget that reflects values of the city, respects the wishes of the city, that we didn't pass the levy. We're respecting the wishes of the city. We're making hard choices, none of which anyone here is happy about. We're being responsible stewards of the will of the people. And hopefully, over the next year, we can engage our community in a responsible conversation about how to relieve the stress of our city staff, our law enforcement officers, our businesses. But that's not what we can do tonight. What we can do tonight is pass this budget. Thank you.
All right, so I have Dawn, yeah.
So, City Manager West, am I not speaking correctly then? You put forth the police department's strapped, that you've cut your staffing to the bone. You put forth a budget that provides basic operations, but you're barely keeping the lights on. Are you satisfied with this budget?
It's,
Can't we tweak it so that you could spend money in other areas to fund the core operation?
when we began this discussion, I was asked by Councilor Boisvert, what can we do? It looks like there's only a few things we can do. There are only a few things we can do. We can either find more revenue or we can cut full departments. If we cut any more people, all it does is put more onus on the people that are left.
If you don't trim other things.
We've trimmed everything that we believe we can trim to bring you a balanced budget.
Kate.
Yeah, I just wanna, recognize to Evan's point, we've spent hours, staff spent hours, our citizen and council members spent hours with that staff. Lots of input has gone into this budget. And then I also just want to, comment on the rubber stamping comment, because it is personal. I just happen to be the person that called the vote. Everybody else voted. They could have voted down. They could have said no. I just happen to be the person. And if that lumps me into the rubber stamping, and I know I've certainly been mentioned on social media and news media for that, I don't mind that. We're following the process. And I think we need to be very respectful of that process. That's.
All right, Kathy, and then Aaron's after.
I think I just also want to issue the reminder that, we have amazing department heads that contributed substantially to the budgeting process because they each know their departments best. Would you agree that department head input was substantial for each section of the budget?
Yes, budget committee member, I would, and budget committee member Boisvert and Garrison were with us and they can attest to that.
And that's kind of what I've heard is that they heard from each department head a review of the budget and what they could and could not cut. So we either trust the people who are ultimately in charge of each of these departments and understand the sacrifices that they are making, or we don't. So this is not City Manager West's budget. It is the city budget put together by city staff with community input. And I think that's an important distinction that people need to be reminded of.
Aaron.
I was gonna say something very similar to what you just said. Department heads and administrators took a tremendous amount of care. No one knows their divisions better than the director of stage one. No one probably cares more about what they do. And they're cutting budgets based on the revenues that we have available, based on the votes of this community. I would like it to be different. I voted for the levy, I very proudly voted for the levy, and I would vote for another levy. Do I think that we need to do and approach that levy process differently next time? We do. I 100% agree with the mayor with her comments as it relates to social media. And it's a quote, local news. They muddied the water. In some cases, just outright false. And that doesn't help. And having spent 20 years working in the legislature, we're trying to get people to care. I can't make you care. I can make it super easy for you. I will put the agenda in your email box. Heck, I will send a car to get you how to care and get in that car. And so the challenge of informing communities about this work, there has to be a reciprocal relationship. I do believe we have to reach 75% across that table as the government. Coming to you, asking for you and asking for faith, but you have to reach that. And so as we sit here today and talk about what we'd like to do And I appreciate what Dana said about the values of the community. We could have, like, there was an opportunity to operationalize those values with that levy, and we didn't. So we're here today now, and as much as it would be great to say these, not doing something here is going to translate into revenue someplace else, it isn't gonna work that way. And I also go back to something that we said early on, or I said early on, we haven't said it as well, we have to be thoughtful moving forward. And I think some of these ideas undercuts that thoughtfulness of how do we get out of this. If we want business to come to this community, we need to have a community to come to. We need to have a place that people want to locate. We talk about selling property. Who wants to buy property in a community that isn't going to invest in itself? I mean, we're gonna here before the library, see the trolley. I will put my hand up and say, I was a skeptic of the trolley. And I'm never fond of using one-time funds for ongoing revenue, an ongoing need, and I have the good representative. But I have seen its value, and it's the people who write it every day, and so I'm not talking about ours, when I'm talking about the community we want to have. And so if we have a balanced budget here, is it what we want? No. Is it what we can do today based on the resource that we have, based on what the community is told us and what the community is willing to do? And so to a point has been made several times. You didn't want to fund the services. I'm not going to contextualize your votes. I'm not gonna whatever your personal reason for voting that way is, but we don't have the resources theretofore, we can't keep things open. And maybe an object lesson will help open those doors to education. I happened to be at Waterford Park a couple weeks ago with my kids, and I saw graffiti on the slides. And I pointed out to my husband, like, if this is what we're looking forward to. And as we were leaving, in fact, a little bit later, I was in the car, here come 3 people with buckets and rags and spray. And proceeding to wipe it off. And it's a community, Southeast Independence community group. Took it upon themselves. I mean, this is putting your money right now. This is what we need. They give me a bottle of graffiti for it. Now I carry it around with me, so like, I'm on graffiti patrol. But it's that kind of responsiveness and that kind of stepping up that will get us through this. But again, this is what we have today. And it's balanced. It's what no one wants. I don't want to see the police chief and his officers stress more. I don't want to see Fred stress more. I don't want to see Jason and Amy, who are doing everything they can to keep a hold of what we have for when, and it will turn around, but it's gonna take time. So with that, I appreciate the mayor's comment about rubber stamping the budget. I will only say that I find that an offensive comment. I think we took a lot of time and deliberation. Simply the votes weren't there for the ideas that were presented last time, and I know that that's democracy. The votes weren't there for the levy I wanted, and that's democracy. So we're here now.
All right, I'm sorry if I got out of order, but I have Dana Marilyn, so, or Jessica, Dana Marilyn.
Yeah, I will say, just last week, at the, I believe, beginning of the meeting, it was announced that our contingency had been reduced by quite a bit. And then the very next item was the presentation of the Economic Development Fund, in which we chose to draw funds over the contingency. So it's very clear to me that we do make decisions here. It's not just rubber stamp. However, to say that the budget's fine as presented simply because it's been presented that way, we've already contradicted ourselves, because just last week we made a change to it. So we definitely do need to take the opportunity, excuse me, to consider some of these items. Now, on the second page of these notes, yes, like, all this is operation. It's nothing we can touch. And on the first page, those first 3 items, those would be line items, just referencing with David pointed out. Those first 3 would be line items that we could touch. The second page isn't really anything we can do about. Spending time on this is eating up time, and a lot of people here have already mentioned time. the amount of time we put in this. That really hits me wrong as a community member, because we have one job, and that's to take care of the people of the city. And to say we're in a hurry to get out of here, or we've spent too much time on this and we need to just get it over with, I don't like that. And I just want to make that known. Outside that, I didn't have any further comments.
Jessica?
Well, we don't have to throw the mayor under the bus again next year. I would like to call for the vote. Make a motion, I don't know the wording, make a motion to vote on the budget as is with all of the amendments and the changes that we have made.
Make a motion to move the budget as amended.
Yes, thank you.
That's the Oprah.
Who's seconding?
Second.
Order, is there discussion?
Order and silent.
What?
Could you repeat that motion, please?
The motion was made to approve the budget as amended.
Thank you.
Yeah. Discussion?
Point of order, would now be the time to propose my amendment?
Well, there's already a motion on the table.
Ethan?
Can I politely, respectfully, ask committee member Porter to withdraw the motion so we can run the fee/levy revenue generation ideas to ground. In good faith, and I need to ask this question, these questions, is this part of the record? This part of the record of the budget? So this is on record, whether or not we belabor every suggestion. It is here. Nobody is saying that we want to suppress any executives. I was even going to suggest that we respectfully and politely read through each one of them, just so that we make sure that we feel like it's being good. But to that point, this is almost an exact repeat of what happened last year. Because I would probably vote for this, but I would do it on a protest because I'm with Dana here. It is balanced, but we cannot kick the can or cut our way out of a revenue problem. So to do our due diligence, I would like at least to have a discussion, potentially a motion, if anybody's so inclined, for revenue generation in the format of like a fee or even a levy. I'm not so cool on the levy idea, but maybe a fee structure is effective. And we can't do that if you have a motion with a second and then we vote, and we're all kind of like wanting the budget to pass, but we do know this is a revenue problem. And we haven't done anything to generate revenue. Yeah. So I repeat my question respectfully, not because I don't like the idea, but we withdraw the motion so that we can discuss revenue, not have a repeat of what we had last year. So we then at least see whether or not the council or the committee could vote for revenue generation, or at least, you know, like we said at the beginning, let's go through these questions and go back to it. So that.
I'm kind of chuckling to myself, sorry, man.
Yes.
I'm chuckling to myself a little bit because I think the roles were flipped last year.
Yes,
I
they were.
thought that things went a little bit
Yes,
fast.
they were.
And I think you were the one that called.
I actually asked, hey, would you please consider recalling your motion? So this is now 2 for 2 now.
I will because, and exclusively because last year I was disappointed that I couldn't bring those things to the table that I still wanted to discuss. So I will take that back.
And I believe the second also has to.
Not on me anymore, it's on you, girl.
Check finally, a couple of comments before I consider withdrawing. I feel a couple of things about the ideas here. We're gonna continue with the ideas are all the same on a different issue. We're gonna have the same discussion about the operations of the city over and over again. So I think to some extent, we are having that discussion, whether we apply it to the cuts, the community development, whether we apply it to the elimination of the communication position, it's the same conversation. with regards to the revenue, I don't disagree, we need to have a conversation about revenue. I suggest that, based on the previous comments said, there doesn't seem to be an appetite for a fee right now. We can have that discussion, but I think there needs to be a broader discussion before we approach that in this budget cycle. And then with regards to the fee structure, that's a long-term conversation, or at least a conversation that I would like to have that conversation, thinking that something's gonna be different than what we've already said tonight. And I'm not comfortable voting for a fee tonight of any kind based on the feedback we've received from our community. My own personal ability to want to do it versus the larger communities. So I'm not going to say no. I will withdraw it. I'm not comfortable doing it. But I would do it for the sake of implementation to be have it. That is different than what we've already said tonight. I will open the door for the possibility that there is a new proposal. So I will withdraw my second.
You get all that, Myra?
Not for words. I'm not for it today, and so unfortunately,
So prior to the discussion, I had Kate, Emma, and Shannon for discussion, and that's a little bit of.
Just touching briefly on the revenue, I agree that we focus a lot on cutting, right? Budget cuts. My desire is that by the time we get back here next year, we have really robust, turned over every single rock, looked at every way that we can maximize revenue, whether that's economic development, maximizing our utility fees, looking at other random fees that we might be able to implement. You know, I was having, when the LOC was here, we had a discussion about like, what are other communities doing outside of the box that we might be able to implement here. I think the timing of it for like a budget discussion, because it's gonna come back to, we don't know tonight or even a week from now, how much revenue might that generate. And so I think those are really good things for us to look at. I just don't know how we'd be able to come up with a concrete number to put in the budget for this year, and that's my concern with that. Evan?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's really important for this committee to realize that if done wrong, conversation and implementation of the fee could lead to a citizen's repeal of said fee. I think these take a long time and a lot of conversation to be had. And I support the mayor's method of spending time outside the budget to have a robust conversation of what fees could look like and get citizen buy-in up front and not repeat the mistakes of the city of Salem. 20 minutes down the road, that made every possible mistake they could have potentially done. Getting ahead of themselves, getting ahead of their citizens by implementing fees without engaging the population. The people spoke just like 15 points.
Yeah.
Despite, my personal feelings, they spoke, and we have to respect that. So I really appreciate what Dana's saying. I thank him for looking at the numbers, changing his perspective, and being an advocate. But this is the hard part about democracy sometimes. Sometimes you lose and you can't just take the football and go home. You have to pass off the football. So it's gonna be dang near impossible for anyone to convince me about a big increase right now. So I'll be quite honest about it.
This will make it abundantly clear that I in no way meant to imply that anybody wants to vote on the budget the day it's presented to us. That was, obviously an exaggeration or whatnot. I think like last year, we deliberated for several days. Previously in a budget committee meeting, somebody did make a recommendation the first day to approve it, and I stopped that conversation because we definitely have to do our due diligence. And we definitely have to listen to what staff has to say, and I think that's what moves us in one direction or the other. Because we're hearing from human beings who are doing the job and take great pride in what they do. So that was not my intent, I certainly didn't mean to infer that or imply that, whatever the proper word is, but I agree that we've been here for 5 days now. one of those days was training, and that was a lot too, but, and we had to listen to Rob read the budget message,
See.
but I don't think,
He just sent you language.
I don't think anybody in this room wants to give the budget short shrift. I mean, we wanna do our best and be as diligent as we possibly can be, but I agree with what everybody said just recently now, is we need to concentrate on revenue.
All right, I have Marilyn, Nathan, and then Dana, and then I think after those three, we should probably take a break.
So break after this? Is that
Yeah,
what you're
yeah,
saying?
Marilyn,
Okay.
Nathan, and then Dana,
I
so you
wanted-
don't lose your thoughts. And
I-
then
So I am talking, not talking?
you are talking.
Okay. I just, there's a half a dozen things on this list left that we haven't looked at, and I just wanted to expedite things and make individual comments. Reducing the SDCs to spur growth, we've already found out in previous council meeting that there is SDC relief available to builders through the state. Secondly, eliminating the communications position, I think that would go a huge step towards lowering our transparency. I think that's been an asset to our transparency, especially when the city newsletters that come out and you can go look right in the budget, it makes it easy to find. Selling the sports park, we're already talking about selling a park or parks. Funding the downtown manager through tourism and events. There is going to be an adjustment for that, but I think you need, where everything is covered for 2025 summer. And I think we need to let the ad hoc committee on the Independence Days work first, because that may lead towards some other solutions on other things. And the unpaid uncollectible accounts from Minet, we heard at our last meeting that Minet is paying all their bills and also paying back the promissory notes that they wrote for the times that they couldn't. Fund the police, I'd love to have more policemen, but the reality is the dollars are the dollars. The thing that I really think we need to remember is, and I look at this from a council perspective, my job is not to manage the city staff. My job is to hire and fire the city manager and have some trust in the fact that we hired that person. And I know, I mean, I could come and complain, I'm exhausted. I go to meetings 20 times a day and all kinds of things happening, but that's for me to manage, not for you to tell me that I'm not supposed to do those things or that I should hire a maid or something like that. And finally, I think we need to acknowledge that some of this revenue change needs to come from higher up. We're only going to get this limited amount of revenue in tax revenue and gas tax and all of the other things, property tax particularly. We're only going to get that limited amount, and unless the legislature changes something, it doesn't filter down to us at all. And so we're gonna be having these discussions from here on forever after on how to manage the budget, how to cut the budget, how to cut parks, how to cut museums and all the other things until the changes are made at the upper level. And I would recommend, I have talked to our city or our state senator, and I've talked to our state representative, and I would recommend that everybody in here write a letter and say, do something to fix the property tax system, because it is not fair to the cities and we're only going to sink further and further into the quicksand of no revenue. The end.
Thank you. Nathan?
Thank you. Great.
No, I thought we'd go through the three and then take a break.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I just wanted to say thank you, Jessica, for withdrawing, and thank you, Aaron. And I think one of the reasons I was, and I hear your comments are well received, the kind of position I was in, the reason I wanted to is because I've been on this committee 3 years running now. And probably a 10 dozen, maybe good ideas have come out of a collection of concerned citizens like this. And a lot of them aren't really budget committee related things, you know, but we have taken those good ideas, and then just yesterday was one, right? We took an idea that didn't have anything to do with the budget committee, we gave it to city council, and then maybe now we'll see some really good movement. Or we come up with an idea that city staff start furiously scribbling over saying, oh, that's a good one, you know, right? I think the reason I wanted to drill down on this revenue idea, not necessarily because I'm gung ho for a fee tonight. But if there's something that we could do, just even voicing it, putting it out in the ether, and the people that can make a decision, pick it up and run with it. You know, once we pass that budget, we move on to the urban renewal and conversation ceases, right? And the magic happens when we get people like this together and they talk, right? I'm staff officer in the Army, we staff our decisions through multiple working groups over, you know, weeks at a time, depending on the operation. So you have to get people in a room who are concerned and engaged, get the ideas captured, otherwise we'll just be in the same seats next year. So that's one of the reasons I want to do it, is that articulate and voice those ideas so that they get picked up by the right forum. Not because I want to pass it tonight. Just because I think that.
Would it be okay if we did ours when we came back?
Yeah.
Okay, but don't lose that thought.
Our 7 minutes are up. Yes. All right. We'll just get going. Everyone's. All right, good. All right. Can I use anyone to do after the break?
Right. So, as we discussed, I think we've discussed the potential of funding the museum 3 different times so far. So if it's appropriate, I would like to make that motion now.
For the very first one you did,
Yes,
the monthly fee or a levy?
or levy. And I would like to say before I make that motion, that on second thought, I do feel like a fee would be going behind people's backs. So this would be primarily for those, that's not the way to think about it.
Did not allow that here.
Oh, I said, that I do feel like a fee would be going behind people's backs, you know, if they voted no on the levy and we chose, or the council chose to impose a fee, it probably would be going behind people's backs. So, I would move to amend the 2025-2026 budget, the Community Services Fund, by raising it to $235,000. Funding coming from either a 40-cent levy, or a 40-cent levy, something similar to that. As determined by the council.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Understand. Is there a second? All right, without a second, motion dies. All right. Bill?
I would just like to say that, the reason I didn't come up with a second, I guess, is I don't see how we can do that by, what is it, the 1st of June? Is when we have to have the
1st of July.
4th of July?
1st of July.
Alright. I just don't see how that's humanly possible to get that on a ballot and.
Oh, he's talking about this fee.
No,
you
you said levy.
Oh, I didn't even hear levy.
Yeah, levy.
Right. I don't think that at any point in the future we would either. I mean, because we're always here 4 or 5 weeks before, so it'll always be a 1-month crunch. I just want to point that out.
So well, I still got the gavel.
No, I know, but I said, I was letting you know who's next. Bill, you're continue.
Yeah, it's got one more question and, City Manager West,
Yes, sir.
kind of a question for you. So I've been on the budget committee for 3 years now, and, I love the fact that, you know, Councilor Roden is bringing up good ideas, but one of my frustrations that I would voice to my wife and whoever listened is that it would be the night before we're supposed to pass the budget, and then we're coming up with great ideas still, and I'll always feel like, okay, well, it's too late now to bring this up, it's too late now. And I think you even said, it's not too late, that's why we're here, right, last year. So my question is how can we fix this so that we feel like there's enough time to put something in place, like a levy or something like that, for the next fiscal year? Maybe, it's reached too far for this particular year's budget, but is there a possibility for the budget committee to meet on a quarterly basis or something like that, where we're having an earlier discussion to come up with good ideas for fixing the next fiscal year?
I'll go ahead and let Rob respond.
So I have worked with a number of organizations that have quarterly budget committee meetings. There's nothing in budget law that says you can't do that. They don't obviously speak about the budget per se, because you don't have a budget message, you don't have a budget to talk about yet. But what I've seen happen is, and we did this when I was the finance director at Sherwood, we got the group together and we talked about what was going on currently with the city financially.
Like a working group?
Yeah, and I mean, they could make recommendations to council, because council was part of it, obviously. But it was more just knowing what's going on at the time and having those conversations like you all are having now, and like Nathan was talking about. Sorry, I shouldn't call you guys by your first names. Thank you. But that sort of thing then led to what I thought was a more efficient process, because those questions were coming up maybe in the second quarter, third quarter meetings. And then as we went into the actual budget deliberations, those things were already fully baked, to borrow a phrase. So I've seen it work. Now, it takes a level of coordination and effort to make that work, right? Because otherwise it's just another meeting that nobody wants to go to, right? So I think it takes having the right people involved on the staff side. It takes a city manager and a finance director that want to make that work, okay? And it takes this group wanting to make that work and understanding what those meetings are for, because otherwise it is just a, you know, it's just a talking head thing.
And I'll provide clarity that he says that as he's retiring.
There's still one quarter we could take advantage of.
I'm sorry.
You're okay with
Not
another
sorry.
meeting, right?
Pardon me?
You're okay with another meeting, right?
Oh, yeah, what's another meeting?
So that's to answer your question, that's what I would,
I appreciate that.
I'm sure I'll recommend that to her tomorrow.
I'm sure he will.
Well, not tomorrow, Monday.
I appreciate that much a lot. Nathan,
Actually, kind of already answered. It was, that working group.
Nathan, or Dana.
Yeah, so if, I completely understand that point, if, because it's valid, you know, there's one council meeting between now and when the budget has to be approved by council. That's really not enough time to propose anything. How would we actually set it up so that we did quarterly meetings, like physically, what's the process?
All it takes is deciding we're gonna do it.
Okay. Just like, make a motion for it, or?
Where's that
Decide?
policy?
It's, that doesn't have anything to do with this budget.
Right, that's what.
I think you've been heard,
Yeah.
and I won't speak for council, because that'd be a bad thing for me to do. And I'm certainly not gonna speak for her, because she's already hit me 3 times tonight. So, but I'll let you speak.
Yeah, what if
It's gonna happen, right?
What?
Quarterly budget committee meetings.
It's on my list to bring up with the mayor at our next meeting.
On my list too.
There we go.
There we go.
Well, we just had the Independence Days ad hoc, it's kind of similar to that, it's something you guys would discuss and implement it. Sorry.
Kathy, or is there, we're on Kathy, then Evan, you're next.
Yes, I know I didn't wave my finger, but it's one conference.
This, I'm not waiting.
No throwing cones.
The levy, that could just come from council, that doesn't have
That's
to come
correct.
from this
Correct.
body.
But we wouldn't have it budgeted, so it wouldn't matter, right?
Right, well,
But if
correct.
it has to, would have.
So,
Well, that's
and a levy is, as we heard earlier, is gonna take time because there's an education process with the community. And we are fresh off a resounding no.
I understand.
So if you go knock on a door and say, hey, next November, levy, they're gonna say, did you not hear me? No means no. So
Be like circle.
I appreciate, put a marker down on for future,
Understand.
but not gonna happen soon, I don't think.
Well, we don't predict the future. It could happen. I
I-
believe in
I-
positive thought.
I will say, I am not sure that the appetite is
Yeah,
there,
I know.
but when folks see results, they may come to us and say, hey, could you guys give this another go?
Yeah. Evan?
One of the things, I have the privilege of staffing our incidental fee committee process at the university. And it's a lot like this. One of the things we do after the fact is we have a steering committee of select members of the budget committee, and we talk about things that we learned amongst this budget process to maybe improve for next year. I think it could be a great practice for this committee to implement, have the mayor appoint a few members of this full committee. And have another extra meeting where we talk about things we learned, maybe we change a couple things, and maybe we talk about processes of ideas earlier in that, just have that conversation. I don't know if it necessarily requires us to meet quarterly, maybe that's the better way, but just wanted to throw that out there as another idea, because I tend to, it's a great process, because we make notes throughout the whole the whole term, because incidental fees is a 10-week process. I'm not suggesting this needs to be a 10-week process. And then at the end, we share, the steering folks share with leadership the things that they hope to see change next year. It feels like a really great, holistic, democratic process. We can learn from our young people.
Dana.
Yeah, I would say, I like that plan too. I would just caution that if we do a steering committee, that it at least still be made up 50% of council members.
Oh, yes.
So.
Or more public members.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would like to just some clarification. So maybe we want to discuss, did we want to continue discussing these questions in here? Yes.
For what it's worth, personally, since I made a statement before, I feel like we have, done a due diligence discussion on the idea of the revenue generation. Even, you know, we didn't get a second, I really respect and thank you, Dana, for doing that submission. It shows that you have follow through and that you put your money where your mouth is, so to speak. And I would just like to also finish and say that, we talked about how the city has made a resounding declaration that they don't want the levy and they don't like the fee. And it's kind of an article or a component of first past the post voting, right? Yeah, there were 60% of people that wouldn't want the levy and didn't like the fee. But there was 40% that did. It's true. And when you have, you know, winner takes all type of arrangements, you leave a lot of stuff out there on the table. So just saying something for a steering committee, for the budget committee quarterly or some other group to really try and, you know, creatively, as City Manager West has said, discover ways that we can do things outside the box. Because there's definitely appetite for it. It's just we have a voting system that makes us get everything for nothing.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Because I wanted to say it. I know. I'm sorry, but I think this has to be said because we've heard it over and over and over again. We've heard in this committee, and I heard a lot during the levy, that we got to run things like businesses are tight belts. And we've all heard that. What business limits their revenue? What business does some of the things that city's been required to do by votes of the people? We can't run a city like a business. It's a false narrative. Cities aren't supposed to be ran like businesses. If they did, lots of things would be different. And cities are run as value. They're based on the values of the people, right? And we do a lot of things in the city not because they make the city money, because they provide a public good for our citizens. And so as we get close to voting for this budget, take a note from my old boss, put a marker down. And I expect us to continue the conversation with people around what kind of community do we want to live in, because I was attracted to this community. You know, I wasn't born here, I was attracted to this community because it provided great services, wonderful parks, great library, beautiful downtown. Those are all things that are at risk if we don't step up and find revenue. So thank you for trying to lead that. That's not an easy thing to do. And I hope we can continue this conversation into the future around what are ways to convince our neighbors and friends to join us in those conversations.
Well, from what I'm hearing is that, like, if we are ready to approve the budget, I'll need 3 different motions. I guess I'll just make the first one. I move to approve the City of Independence budget for fiscal year 25-26 as amended.
Second.
To it.
Jessica Meter.
Garrison and Porter.
Discussion? Alright. What?
Just, which part are we discussing?
The move to approve the budget. Oh, yeah, we have to.
I just want to clarify that how do we solve the independent state situation? So where did we offer $40,000?
So the independent state is good for this year, and we're doing the ad hoc
I think it's yesterday.
Sorry about the.
And then there's the money in the economic development fund for possible revenue source for them to do it.
Second one.
Loan, yeah, but it's a loan available for the person, whoever takes over, there's a loan available
Okay.
for whoever to take it over.
Well, make
Just
sure
to
we at least
clarify.
address one of the problems.
Mhm. Any other discussion? Karen?
Just let me briefly, when I come to it. Just say thank you to everybody in this room. Thank you to everybody who came out, thank you to everybody who's listening, including my kids at home, hi kids. But
They're not really wanting to.
It's gonna get a quiz for
Like an hour.
They were raised around the legislature, they probably aren't watching. But I wanna take an opportunity also just to again acknowledge the directors and the staff in the city. Who have taken a tremendous amount of time in putting this budget forward, knowing that it comes at a cost to them. Knowing that they're gonna be asked to do more with less, knowing that we're gonna have the same expectations, that they have always delivered on professionalism and high quality of integrity of their work. And so I also, in saying that, make a commitment to you as a member of this community who's asking you all to do more or less, to commit to finding that revenue and engaging in that conversation. Because it is a conversation that we're gonna have, and it's gonna, we have to find a way to address revenue on an ongoing basis. The state isn't gonna save us. They just aren't, and as much as we would like to change ballot measure 5 and 50, and as much as those conversations occur, the transient nature of that body, we need to start over every time. And so that's why we're this many years into it and still talking about it. So we have to save ourselves and we have to do that together. And so, again, not anybody's ideal. No one wants to see the library closed a day. No one wants to see the museum closed. But in saying that, I also see some hope. I see conversations getting started. I see opportunities to have open dialogue. I see that we can have both agreement and disagreement in a moment and know that at the end of this, we all want the same thing. A wonderful community that thrives. And even in disagreement, holding that at the center of these conversations will help us find a way forward. And so tonight, I will absolutely be voting yes for this. I don't do it because this is exciting budget to do. This is how we want to see, but I do it because we now have started a conversation to move this forward. And next year, I hope we're here with a different revenue outlook. Or at least a different revenue option from the city. And that we will be having different conversations, but I also know that next year, even if we have to have tough conversations, we can do it together and in that disagreement, still find agreement and a way to move forward. So thank you.
Shannon?
Do we have to accept the state revenue stuff before we pass budget? It's before approving the budget on the agenda.
Nope, that comes at adoption.
Okay.
Because we'll have a hearing, we'll have a hearing.
Well, I
at-
think it wasn't.
I'll run it through.
I mean, in the past, we've been on accepting the state revenue.
I think we did historically. I'm just, maybe it is an independence thing and perhaps we could do it out of tradition and history.
Fine,
Okay,
that's okay. So, we would need somebody to make a motion. I'm gonna have to make this up on the fly, so don't call me Fred.
hang on.
What?
Do we have to withdraw this motion?
No,
Okay.
no,
I just wanna make sure.
no, we can do it after this.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
sorry.
Fine.
Because we're still just in the approval. It's the adoption where things really get set in stone.
Yeah, I don't.
So we have a motion and a second.
Yeah, and then we're discussion.
Oh, yeah, we're still
Shannon, and then we
discussing.
have Bill. And Shannon, sorry, you have your discussion, so then Bill.
Okay, I'd just like to say, again, I've been doing this 3 years. I think this has been the most transparent meeting that we've had, and I wanted to commend the mayor for that. I think that you've done an exceptional job at really promoting transparency right from the start. I want to thank the city manager for hiring Mr. Rudy. You're not my favorite person in a lot of regards because you've uncovered a lot of things in the budget that nobody likes to hear. But that's why he hired me, because he knew you were a guy. So I want to thank you for doing a great job, because I don't think anyone here is going to see him next year, right, at this table.
Correct.
So thank you for that. And then lastly, I'd like to thank whoever put this thing together, because this is absolutely beautiful. If you guys remember a couple years ago, and you remember first time I showed up, I was handed a giant Excel sheet.
Yeah.
I had no freaking clue what I was looking at. This has got pictures, it tells a story, and it has the budget and the balance. So thanks for that.
All right, no further discussion? Not seeing any cones anywhere. All right, then we're gonna vote.
Chair Garrison,
Aye.
Member Forsler. Aye. Member Porter. Aye. Member Martin Willis. Member Christensen.
Aye.
Member Court. Aye. Member Seiler.
Aye.
Member Shores.
Aye.
Member Sherman.
Aye.
Member Wager.
Aye.
Member Roden. Opposed. Member Rasmus.
Aye.
And Member Moore.
Aye.
Bradley has left the meeting. Yeah.
Bradley, just left for good.
He had to get to something that he was doing.
Are we still discussing the possibility of getting this group together after
So
the
the,
new year has
the
begun?
mayor and I will
discuss.
will
They're going to
discuss.
discuss it. They have it on their list of things
Oh, I
to.
wrote out a nice little motion here, but if you're gonna do it.
Yeah, we'll.
Okay, I
So
would like to see that happen.
is there,
And sometime after you have presented the budget for the first quarter to the council.
Yes, ma'am.
is there a motion that you need to make?
No.
Or the, nope, okay. So there are two other ones on it. We need two other motions.
Motion passed.
Yeah. Thank you. Yay. All right. In order to finish this part, though, we have two other motions that need to happen.
I move to accept state revenue sharing.
No, that's.
That's okay. Yes.
Second.
There's more words.
No, she's taking one off though. It's not on the list.
It's not on the list.
This is the historical one, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is the one that, what, the traditional one?
This is tradition. Yeah.
Okay, tradition. And
Somebody said, I'll second.
Aaron, second.
What is this motion?
To accept.
To accept
state
state
shared.
revenue sharing, state shared revenues.
Thank you.
Discussion? Alright,
What exactly does that mean?
it means
It's
that,
the revenue that's generated at the state level that they give back to the cities. We've often said yes or no to whether or not we want to receive it. Of course, we want to receive it, but it's just something that we've done. I mean, if we want to get rid of that for the ad hoc group, if we want to make this.
There's actually a public hearing before the council. And that happens with the adoption where we say that we're eligible to accept state shared revenues. And then we take public comment and then we actually have a resolution at that level. But if we've done it at the budget committee, there's no harm, no foul.
It's the recommendation
Yes, ma'am.
to the council
Yes, ma'am.
to accept the money.
yeah.
Yep.
We'll look at that.
I
Okay.
think that's all discussion. I think we can vote on it.
Good.
Or Bill, do you still? Okay, just wanna make sure.
Roll call.
Okay. Member Morton.
Aye.
Member Rasmus.
Aye.
Member Roden. Member Wager. Member Sherman.
Aye.
Member Source.
Aye.
Member Seiler.
Aye.
Member Court.
Aye.
Member Christensen.
Aye.
Member Martin Willis.
Aye.
Member Porter.
Aye.
Member Forsler.
Aye.
Member Garrison.
Aye.
You're getting really good at this, Myra.
Yeah, you did.
Alright, there,
It's like you know us.
there are two others. Alright, I move to approve the levying of the city's full tax rate of 4.5897 per 1,000 of assessed value.
Second.
That was Garrison and Porter.
Yeah.
She's quit.
Discussion. No discussion, move to vote.
Chair Garrison.
Aye.
Member Forsworth.
Aye.
Member Porter.
Aye.
Member Martin Lewis.
Aye.
Member Christensen.
Aye.
Member Core.
Aye.
Member Seiler.
Aye.
Member Source.
Aye.
Member Sharman.
Aye.
Member Waller. Member Roden. Aye. Member Prosperous.
Aye.
Member Morton.
Aye.
Alright, motion passes. Alright, the last one we have is, I move to approve the city imposed taxes in the amount of $400,341 for general obligation bond.
Second.
That was Garrison and Christensen.
Morton gave up.
Discussion? This is for general, no, vote.
Okay. Chair Garrison.
Aye.
Member Forsworth.
Aye.
Member Porter.
Aye.
Member Martin Lewis.
Aye.
Member Christensen.
Aye.
Member Core.
Aye.
Member Seiler.
Aye.
Member Core.
Yeah, but I need to
Aye.
call for adjourn.
Member Sharman.
Aye.
Member Waller. Member Roden. Opposed. Member Prosperous.
Aye.
Member Morton.
Aye.
Motion passes. Right, so now I need a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I will second.
Second.
We're gonna open the urban.
The second by Brett, I
Oh.
motion press for this.
Thank you.
Stuff.
Do you have to vote on that, or is that just
You can do all in favor.
all in favor of adjourning this meeting?
Aye. Opposed? Alright, we have one other piece of business we need to do, the urban renewal agency. Department agency.
So basically, we have made the one amendment. So the urban renewal budget is before you now for further discussion or to approve as amended.
I need,
Oh, yeah, sorry.
sorry, I need to call the order, I now call the meeting reconvened at 8:55. Or begin, does any committee member wish to declare an actual potential conflict of interest for the urban renewal agency? Okay, roll call.
Member Morton.
Here.
Member Prosperous.
Here.
Member Roden.
Here.
Member Waller.
Here.
Member Sharman.
Here.
Member Source.
Present.
Member Seiler. Here. Member Core. Here. Member Christensen.
Here.
Member Martin Lewis. Here. Member Porter. Here. Member Forsworth.
Here.
Chair Garrison.
Here.
We're all missing partner.
Member Quorum.
All right, thank you. Discussion, I think that there's not a lot to say other than the one change that we have. And that change has been approved, correct? We've already had a meeting. and-
Yep, we already
Yeah,
had
it's all
it.
done. Is there discussion on the urban renewal?
The fund that, fell $600 or 600,000 short that Brian did transfer. Did we ever get a precise answer on why, other than it's just short?
Yeah, I mean, it was a combination of we had my notes, but we had, we accelerated the repayment of loans, SDC loans, because we were required to by law. And that combined with the property tax or tax increment receipts being less than projected is what put us basically in a cash flow position that doesn't allow us to pay back the general fund as scheduled. We have put together a rough schedule of when we think that, can occur. It looks like around fiscal year 34, 35, that things will be all square and done in paying back the general fund. That's give or take. I mean, we still have to work out some details. But as far as this budget goes, having reduced the payments to the general fund 24, 25, and as budgeted 25, 26 is the first step in putting them into a positive cash flow position. It's gonna take a couple, 3 years.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Right, other discussions.
We just need a motion to agree.
Right. All right, so we just need one.
Oh, Evan.
Don't wait.
Sorry, Evan.
Well, I was gonna move to approve the
Move to approve the
proposed urban renewal budget as written.
Wait.
Oh, as amended.
As amended. Yeah, I thought he said amended.
Nope.
I couldn't hear it.
As written.
amended, declared and certify the maximum tax instruments that may be raised.
Yeah.
Is that the motion that you want?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
And the second by Court?
Discussion? All right, vote.
Member Morton?
Aye.
Member Crossman? Member Roden? Opposed. Member Walker?
Aye.
Member Sherman?
Aye.
Member,
Aye.
Member Sanders? Aye. Member Ford?
Aye.
Member Christensen?
Aye.
Member Martin Willis?
Aye.
Member Porter? Aye. Member Ford?
Aye.
Chair Harris?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, so I need to call.
Chair, I agree with the second.
That was a
Discussion?
source of precedence.
Yeah, source of precedence.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No, motion carries.
So I just want to say thank you to everybody here. Thank you.
It was good work.
Thank you.
It's up to you.
Yeah.
Hang him if you want him.